We're live! Magic!
It's alive!
Oh no! Oh, cool. So,
Griff?
welcome people who are watching.
Yeah. Oh, wait. This way. There we go.
There we go.
Across many states. This is a panel on finding your style of magic and energy work. We're here a couple minutes early to give everybody a chance to find the stream online. And we'll also potentially dive into our introductions because there's there's so much to talk about and lots of people on the panel to introduce. So do you want to take things away now?
Hi, I'm Michelle Belanger. I practice energy. Like, I resisted calling it magic for the longest time because of stigmas, and so just kind of called it energy work. Also resist witch or witchcraft because it was so distinctly different from what people who identified as witches as I was coming to age were doing. And so kind of my own little homegrown brew of stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I am Illyria. I'm a member of House Skepru. I would say that I practice energy work in a general sense, and I also practice will work. I've recently come to understand that I may also practice something else that I don't have a good name for. But we can probably talk about that at some point during the panel. I won't get too far into it now. Let's see. Let's go. Oh no, this way.
That's me. Hi, I'm Puck, also known as Carla. I am an ally of the house, priest case. I would say I practice natural, kind of wild magic with a little bit of East Texas hoodoo thrown in there.
Nice. All right, let's pass it on.
Wonderful special guest.
Yes, our surprise
additions. Why we wanted to do this because there was a good conversation that happened at Marcon that I want to share with people.
That's you, Suj and Arjil.
I'm Suj. I'm Arjil. Yes, we are friends of the house and miss terribly. I am a self-appointed song witch. Professional singer-songwriter, do a lot of healing work, energy work, spell work with the music that I make live and recorded. And I try not to make a thing about it, but it's fun to go to the witchy places, and it served me well, so I keep on doing it.
Oh, and I'm Arjil. I'm a magical weirdo. The time that I came to magic, there were no resources, and I was down here in the Bible Belt, so I just kind of had to make some shit up and see if it worked. And so now I'm here. I'm pretty heavily chaos magic influenced via White Wolf role-playing games and movies. So and I just had it till it worked. So I'm weirdo.
Magical autodidact.
So, yeah. Ooh, that's a good one.
Thanks, Michelle.
Hey.
I am Shay. I am a member of the house. I will second Illyria's statement of I am an energy worker and a will worker. My particular path is very much a hodgepodge. When I came to magical working, I sort of explored a little bit of everything, trying to find what is the path that fits for Shay, and consequently did not find a path that fit for Shay. So I take the bits and pieces of the traditions that I resonate with and form them into the amalgam that is the sort of self path tradition that I follow. It's very Gaelic Celtic influenced. It's very Nordic influenced, with some Eastern both Japanese and Chinese philosophy, as well as some Middle Eastern aspects sort of thrown in. So, yeah. And that way.
Yeah, you got it right first try. So, I again, being a member of the house, an energy worker, that the sort of systems that we use in the house. Personally, I study and practice traditional Norse Seder and rune work, but also I use this, and I refer to myself as an artificer. I build things, I make things, and as I do this, I weave that energy into what I build and make to have purpose and effect.
Hi, folks. I'm Kess, and surprisingly, I'm actually an oddity out of this group because I'm part of some very established traditions. So I am actually an ordained monk within Vajrayana Buddhism. And the type of monk I am is the Nakpa, which is generally understood as like the more mystical village type monk rather than the ones who just live in the temple and meditate all day.
Wizard.
And I also have a strong background in ceremonial magic, specifically the grimoire traditions. The Lesser Key of Solomon was actually my first magical text, which apparently other people think is not a good choice. And I am an initiate of a Vichya or fairy tradition of witchcraft, which I've only seriously been studying for about 3 years now.
Also, don't leave out, you're one of the only people I know who did the Holy Guardian Angel rite out of Abramelin by the fucking book.
Yeah, I'm a ridiculous person who actually did the Abramelin ritual according to the Den translation of the text. And I did it largely because people weren't doing it, and I was tired of people talking about a ritual and the result without actually having done it. So I had to do it. So I felt I could talk about it.
Science.
Nice. Chaos.
Nice.
Or, yes, chaos and ceremony. Chaos and ceremony. Anyway.
So what I wanted to do with this panel is, first of all, like I think the introductions do it pretty nicely, is express the diversity of expression, the way in which each person comes to magic, and also the many different ways that we can express it and work with it. And I think maybe the place to start would be that learning experience, you know, kind of like finding your own path. Like what was the first magical act you remember doing that you were aware, I have, this is magic, like holy shit, something just worked?
That's a good question.
Who do I want to pick on as we think about that?
I'm volunteering. Tribute.
Okay, volunteer.
So caveat, this may not actually be the first magical act, but it was the first time that I recognized I was doing something.
That.
Later I looked back and I was like, there were definitely things before this. But so I was actually, I was playing bingo, my very first time playing bingo. And I had my eye set on this particular awesome to my 15-year-old self suitcase. And I was like, I really want to win at bingo. And one of the people I was there with wanted this set of golf clubs. And I was like, well, gosh, I mean, if I win at bingo, I guess I would get that for her first. But then maybe when they call door prizes, maybe they would call me and I could get the suitcase. So I did a thing and then I won. And I was like, all right, golf clubs, because I promised that was the bargain. I got the golf clubs, and I gave them to my ex-stepmother. And then the door prizes came, and I was like, pick my name. And they did immediately. And nobody had gotten the suitcase, and I went and got it. And it has a long and storied history after that. But at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, this is. I have a power. What do I do with it? Ugh. And didn't play bingo for a while, so thought it wouldn't apply to things. I was wrong, but I will also let someone else recount their first magical act.
I can go. if you want.
Go for it.
So I was very young, so maybe in school, maybe like 5 or something. And I just remember our neighbor called and couldn't find their son. And my mom kind of put her hand over the phone and said, where's Roger, his name. And I kind of did a thing, which I didn't know was a thing at the time. And I told her he was in the culvert about 2 streets over, hiding, playing hide and seek. And she goes, okay, Carla was on her bike and saw Roger in a culvert 2 streets over, and then they went and found him, and he was hiding there. And that was kind of the first time when, I think because my mom said, just, where is he, kind of thing, and I did it. That's, I think, the first time I knew I did something. So I was pretty young, actually.
I like the plausible deniability of like totally on the bike,
Yes.
and yet was just like, hey kiddo, I know you're gonna know.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we carry on in this direction?
Yeah,
Go for it.
Makes sense.
We're dialing the Wayback Machine to July, very hot July of 2002 in the southern Missouri Ozarks. I am at my first witchy event, a first weekend witchy event, and it's the middle of the night. I have played my first concert for a skyclad audience, which is a trip because I never have to imagine people in their underwear ever. I got a memory right here of the next level. And these were some next level witches, and it was great. My teacher is at this event with me, and he says, all right, get your guitar. You and I are going to go up that hill, and we're going to sit under that big sycamore tree under the stars. I'm going to watch your back, and you're going to play for the spirits.
Yeah.
All right. I'm 22. I'm bulletproof. Up the hill we go. I sit down. I start noodling around on my guitar and not saying much, just improvising and not singing out loud, not yet. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I could play this one song, but it's kind of down tempo, and I don't want to ruin the mood if there's a mood. I don't want to bring anybody down. And on the heels of this thought, in my mind, I hear very clearly a voice that I do not know say to me, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We just want to hear you play. Just play. Okay. So I just played, and I was grateful to have had that moment with a buddy, a buddy watching over me, to be open. And it's fun to be open, and that's one of the things that encouraged me to be brave about contacting spirits in place wherever I happen to go, especially when there's music involved. If I'm at a place and I'm given a show, I will check in just a little bit, just silently, not telling anybody else that that's what I'm doing, and just say hi and try to be polite. Your turn, love.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, mine was silly and dumb. I was 13 and I had gotten a hold of the copy of Simon's Necronomicon. We all know it. That. All right, so everything seemed boring, but there was this conjuration of the fire god in there, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And so I got a candle. It was middle of the night, and I lit this candle that was in a bottle, and I was sitting there. I was meditating. I tried to do the chant thingy. I was trying to summon the fire god. I had my eyes closed. I was really concentrating, and there was this flash and a whump, and there was wax all over my carpet, and I was like, woohoo! I don't know if anything happened. I don't know what happened there. I don't, but I was convinced in that moment that, bam, I had just done this. Yeah, I got in trouble for the wax on my carpet. But yeah, it was.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting. It blew my ever-loving little mind. Yeah, so that was mine. It was stupid, but whether it's anything.
But tangible.
Tangible.
Yeah.
Tangible. Yeah.
And having those experiences to grab onto later and be like, but this was real. It feels really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Onward, touche.
Words.
Oh yeah.
as we're talking and sort of in retrospect, I have some things that I think I can trace way farther back than what I think of as personally first actually recognizing that I was doing things. The one experience that I can go to, it's hard for me to trace a first time, because a lot of what I was doing was, very sensory or sort of empathic based energy work at the time. The two that I sort of waffle on, one is, it was a camping trip in Mount Rainier, and there is one of those circle style campgrounds where you're bounded by the woods completely on all sides on the outer ring, and then the inner ring of campgrounds sort of formed a little island of woods, and that island of woods is like maybe an apartment building size. It's not all that big, and a deer has come bounding through the campground and has settled in the center, and like it had startled some people, and it's sort of in a spooked state. And I was just sort of like idling in that wood section at the time, and I just sort of like willed it to be calm, to not be so scared, and slowly started walking towards it, up to the point where I am standing next to this full-grown female deer, petting its side, until my aunt stepped through, at which point it went spook and ran off again. And she was like, "What were you doing?" And I said, "I was just telling the deer to be calm, and I was petting it." And I was probably, I want to say I was like, I guess I was like 10 at that point. So.
Griffon.
So I honestly can't remember the first time that this happened to me, but I know it's been happening to me since I was little, and that has to do with building things and making things. I'll get an idea in my head and I'll say, I want to make this thing, but I don't know how. And then suddenly I do know how, and I go and I do it. And it's when I'm doing it, it's like the skill set has always been there. My hands know what to do. My mind knows exactly what the next step in the process is. And I make things. I watched a fellow do not too long ago, a couple years ago, watched a fellow do some Viking wire weaving work, and so that's pretty interesting. And then I went home and I did it better than the guy who showed me how to do it. And then I built a new jig that no one has ever made before, in how to make this work even faster and quicker. So it's that skill set of just I see something, and either sometimes it is a very clear and vivid memory of having done it before, and sometimes it's just my mind analyzes it, puts it all together, and then I can do this thing. So that's what I do. But I would like to share a story about Shay over here, where I witnessed something that he did that was very astounding. And we joke about this particular thing from time to time, but it happened, and it was real. So Shay and I used to work together at a warehouse, loading appliances and TVs and all this other electronics and home goods and everything like that. A 50-foot trailer would come in, and there'd be this list of stuff that's going somewhere. And Shay would grab the list, and he would just we would stage all of this stuff. And
think like refrigerators and stoves and
washing machines and huge boxes of stuff. So we would stage this in an open portion of the warehouse, and then this truck would roll in that is, of course, too small to fit the amount of stuff that we're supposed to be shipping. Shay would hop on the clamp or the think forklift with a clampy bit. And he'd say, I'm going to call him out. You stage him. I'm like, whatever, dude. And so he'd say, go grab me this. And I'd stage it. He'd grab it, put it in the truck, grab it and put it in the truck, grab it and put it in the truck. And before we know it, we've got 60 feet of freight in a 50-foot truck. And I've always wanted, and I mean, this sounds very mundane, but my God, I mean, I've seen the man warp space and put this stuff in there. So I've always wanted to see the look on the face of the people who have to unload this truck. And it's like a damn clown car, and they just keep pulling freight out of it. They're like, when does it stop? You know?
That's a thing.
Yeah. I as soon as you started talking, I'm like, Ryan, yeah, you need to hear that one. You need to hear that one.
For me, you know, same kind of disclaimer of like, there's always stuff as a kid, but can't necessarily say for sure how serious you want to take it. So I guess in terms of thinking of it as me doing magic would have been grade 9 with the Lesser Key of Solomon, which I cannot remember. I think it was from the Toronto Public Library that I ended up getting it after talking with a friend and finding out it was a thing. And a friend of mine online had abusive parents and had actually made plans to move out, but their parents were always home and, you know, strict timeline, so there was never time for him to get out. And there was the one demon, Ageres, who is known to stop and return those who run away, but with the demons, a lot of time, the flip side also is what they control. And so I had a large sheet of paper that I drew out that entire spiraling snake circle that was in the version I had at the time, and called upon Ageres, and the parents went to the grocery store, I think it was, and their car broke down on the way back on the afternoon that we were planning on him getting out of his house. And that was exactly the point, was Ageres was supposed to stop them so that he could run away. And, you know, a car breaking down seems to be a good way to stop the parents, and he got out of that situation.
I'll tell mine. With the preface of, I'm pretty sure everyone knows that I was really precocious, like maybe dangerously so. So I know that this was 2nd grade. I knew I was doing magic. Like I knew it. It was full intent, full awareness. I could not tell you how I got the idea to do it or like any of it. But I was out on the recess playground, and I don't know if it's obvious, but I wasn't one of the cool kids. I didn't like recess, and I usually rather would be inside reading a book. So I decided that it needed to storm. If it rained, we would go inside. So I stood out there, and I made up a little rhyme, and started chanting it in the middle of this recess playground in Northeast Ohio. I remember it to this day. Thunder, lightning, wind, and rain, blow the clouds in, storm again. Thunder, lightning, wind, and hail, lightning, flash, and thunder, wail. And I just went balls out with that. And a wind kicked up, the clouds start coming in, like I can feel it. Like there's a sense of like just pulling on stuff. And the thing that stopped me, and I have questions about this that I've never been able to answer. The teacher in 2nd grade, who was not my teacher, Ms. Patsy, she was the younger one. She was the recess monitor. Her head whips around from like clear across the thing, stares at me, and goes, "Stop that!" And I'm like, "I'm just saying poetry. You know what you're doing. Stop it." Oh shit. Okay. And, you know, I got that guilty flush that you get, like, if you're caught, like, doing something completely wrong. But, like, and of course, I'm 2nd grade, so I'm not going to ask Miss Patsy how she knew what the fuck I was doing. But also the wind and everything, like, just, like, as soon as it stopped it, like, you could feel the spell just, like, crumble. But, I mean, I was a weird kid and kind of dangerous. Okay.
Thank goodness it was only, you know, wind and rain.
Dangerous. There was the time that I gave my little brother a shamanic death and rebirth when he was 4 too, but that, yeah.
Like it
do?
That's what I thought you were going to tell, actually.
I was realizing, but I was older because I was 7 years older than him, so that would have been like 11 or 12. And I got in trouble for that because of painting his face. Anyhow, so weird shit aside, like the next thing, like because we all have those moments of like, holy fuck, you know, and also I like that there is sort of like that autodidact for some people, like just I'm gonna pull on something. I don't know what it is or where it came from, but like this is gonna work. So from that, what I want to kind of direct us toward is, how did you get to the practice that you have now? And along the way, like also things that you tried that didn't work, and why didn't they work? Because I think that will lead us to our individual styles of magic and where this is supposed to go. Why don't we go backwards and start with Kess and like snake our way back up?
Okay, so kind of how I got where I am. Just trying to make sure I'm hitting all the points you were just mentioning.
Yeah. So how did you get to the how did you get to the practice that fit, but kind of cover along the way like things that you tried that didn't?
For me, it was just a lot of poking. Like I said, for some reason, the Lesser Key was the first magical text I ever really got my hands on, and that actually did seem to resonate with me. But as I got older, I had issues with the Christian aspects of it, and so that kind of pushed me away from it at a time. But I mean, even thinking a bit farther back about the way I do things, I was in the 3rd grade when I started a psychic development group, like you do apparently. I'd got a book on ESP out of the library, and it had a bunch of exercises, and so I grabbed like 3 or 4 of my friends, and I decided we're going to try these things. And I actually did the whole thing of like keeping track of the notes. Like we made our own Zener cards, and you know, I was actually tracking the statistics, even though I didn't have an understanding of the stats. Just like, oh wow, we got 5 right or whatever. But I bring that up because a lot of my stuff has always been kind of systematic and kind of scientific. I very much experiment with a lot of what I do. And part of that is just going along and trying things. But I think it's really important that you keep records, which I did, and that you give yourself objective goals, because that's the only way you can really prove something's happening. And so even at the beginning, that was always a big thing with me. I was going somewhere with that, but I've kind of lost that thought now.
Okay.
But yeah, so I went from ceremonial magic into other forms of it, like less grimoire based and more Golden Dawn stuff. And as someone who is very ordered and systematic inside my head, the Golden Dawn was a great place for me to really start digging, because if you've never looked into their system, they have basically tried to put the entire universe into tiny boxes that you can interconnect to each other, and that was helpful for me. But then I guess my big thing was I got curious about Buddhism and looked into it for a while, and then a friend of mine told me that there was a Lama who was doing one of the initiations that was a public one. And so I'm like, I don't really like Buddhist philosophy or a lot of their ideas here or there, but the magic in this specific form of Buddhism seems really interesting. So I'm just going to go to this empowerment and, you know, pick up a few things and then take it back and try to figure out what's working. And then, you know, several years later, I was actually ordained as a monk, so I didn't actually escape the way I had planned on it.
Buddhist Pringles once you start.
Yeah.
This one lifetime.
And then, you know, going along with that, I had fallen into a group, and we just called ourselves the Magical Working Group. But our whole thing was experimenting with different traditions and actually doing proper experiments. You know, can we make this or that happen? Not necessarily what we were what we needed or wanted in our life, but something that we could objectively look at. So like there's the example in, I think it's Hein's books, or maybe it's Carol, about doing magic to see a woman in a red dress that day, or to have a piece of cake, kind of things like that. And so we did a lot of work with that, and that was a really good experience for me because I liked that system, and it introduced me to Santeria, to Vichya witchcraft, more into Thelema and Taoist magic. And so it was a really great springboard for me to start looking into different traditions. And then somewhere along the way, I ended up with you weirdos.
Yeah, well. There's a quick question. What lama can you give are you comfortable giving the name?
So that would be Lama Sonam Gyatso, though there's more than one. In this case, he's connected to the Namgyal Rinpoche lineage, centered out of Toronto currently.
Onward to Griff.
Okay, so there's kind of two paths that were running concurrent in my life, and they kind of crashed together. So since I was 15 or 16, I was always encouraged to read everything. And I was very interested in religion and spirituality and the occult. And so I did. I just started reading everything I could get my hands on. And over the years, I kind of made that a regular thing where I would pick a topic and I would study it. And then I would pick a new topic, whether it was a religious tradition or a magical practice or whatever. And I would seek out people who were, considered, the names that you would go to, people who are known for those practices. And I'd see if I could talk to them. And sometimes, you do, and sometimes you don't. But sometimes I'd get invited to be a part of things. And it was just, I find the entire field fascinating. So there's this aspect. Now, the other side of the story is, again, around that same time, I started seeing patterns. And I actually am to the point now where I do this as artwork. But so I see these patterns, not just in people, although that is typically the art that I do. I see these patterns of energy in events and in news stories, and it's hard to explain because it's not like I see with my eyeballs things weaving together. It's like with another set of eyes that you see these patterns, and the colors and the shapes and everything means something. Okay, so where do these two paths crash? Well, eventually I started studying the Norse mythology and the Norse styles of magic, and that is exactly what the Seder do. They reach out and they pluck at the threads of reality, and they weave them in different fashions, and they clip this one and then they add that one, and that resonated so strongly with these patterns that I see that it just kind of fell in line. And so since one seemed to be something I'd been seeing, and then suddenly I'm reading about this practice that takes what I'm seeing and makes it something you can do, you can influence yourself. I just kept going down that same route, and it also works so very well with what I do with making things. It's so I'm building this object or a piece of art or something like that, and you reach out and you pluck this thread in the pattern, and you lay it down onto what you're doing, and you alter the reality of something. And that's what I've been doing and how I came to doing it.
So I like to say that starting out, I was raised in a very, very devout atheist family. And my parents were, very, science is sort of how I see science is their religion. They believe what they can measure scientifically. They also were very clear that they were not going to try and brainwash me into their ideals, having themselves gotten out of the various Judeo-Christian backgrounds that they came from. And so they encouraged me to explore and ask questions from a very early age. So I remember being like 6 to 8 and asking my grandmother a question about magic or sensing weird things, and her telling me a story about my dad and how she was out shopping and he wanted something specific from the store, and he realized he'd forgotten to tell her, and so he thought very strongly, please bring home the thing. And then grandma was like, I remember, we should probably get the thing. And so from grandma, I got the concept of psychic connection between people and information could be a thing. I transited through a love of fiction and magic in stories and things like that. So I read a lot of, wow, I can't even think of the authors right now, but my bookshelves will attest. I read a lot of nonfiction, or a lot of fictional stories, and one of them, a favorite author, was Catherine Kurtz. And there is a book in the Derny universe that she created called Derny Magic, and in subscript it says a grimoire. And so, not having actually stumbled into actual magical practices yet, I pick this book up and I read through it as though it's a novel. And it really is a practical explanation of a magical system from the ground up, utilizing the stories in the books as a way of describing how these things happen, from high ritualistic ceremonial magic down to animal empathy. And that opened up a wealth of questions. Also, it opened up a love of that series, because that was the first book in the series I ever picked up. And so that brought me into really wanting to start to study things more. And I had already been through various religions, because the rest of my family were religious in some way, while my core nuclear family was, very, we don't believe in gods. And at that point, I knew that I had already experienced more than believing in nothing could explain. And so I asked my dad to go out to the local titled The Occult Bookstore, and I went through and intuitively pulled 3 volumes off the shelf as these are the things I want to start with. And so I had Daddy Raymond's Big Blue Book. I had the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, Magic, and Alchemy, and what was the title of it? The history of demonology and their names for calling.
Go big or go home.
And so I basically carried those 3 books around with me and randomly delved into them pretty much everywhere. I did not really have a sense of social boundaries. I did not have a sense of what is good or not, because I was encouraged to explore and delve scientifically. So those were constant companions through my entire high school career. Apparently that got me labeled as the weirdo demon worshiper. Go fig. And from there, I just started to, I literally would go back to the bookstore, and I would just sort of close my eyes and think about, from an energetic sense, what was drawing me. And I would pull a volume off the shelf and go, okay, we're going to look at Druidity today. And I would go down tracks like that. And over time, I started to realize that as I got more integrated in myself, I was being drawn to the magical cultures that I felt some sort of resonant past with. And consequently, I wanted to learn more about those cultures to understand that internal personal myth, historical resonance that I was trying to chase down. And really, for me, I think what sort of tied them all together is the aspect, regardless of the magical system, there's always been some form of like divinatory method and seership or future telling, prescience. Those are things that have always sort of been like core focuses for me as an individual. And so I would start a track on how did another system utilize these aspects, and that would start to sort of blend into an item I would keep on my altar or a personal set of like divinatory tools, but also it would be a kernel into that particular system. And so I would go a little bit farther down, the Taoist track, or down the I Ching on that side, or into the Celtic Ogham, or into the Norse runes, or into the modern tarot, until I sort of found myself in the happy medium of really, from an overall path sense, it's sort of path agnosticism. All paths have value to me, and there's not really one that I won't necessarily delve into, but it's really for me, I found it was that divinatory core was the thread that pulled me through each of them.
Onward. Ardil and Suj. 1, 2, 3.
Mine is, it's strange because I'm a weirdo. It started, I think, at about age 2, when I saw Star Wars, the first Star Wars, in a drive-in theater. And in drive-in theaters, you got the speaker box that hangs in the window. And my dad had a CB radio. And so my little 2-year-old brain connected these two things. And I thought that was a giant CB radio for talking to the people on the screen. So I thought that was real. And I never revisited this. So we get to Empire Strikes Back. I'm 4 at this point, 4 or 5. And we were coming back from that. I was in my grandparents' car, and I was trying to use the Force to move this gum wrapper or something. And they didn't tell me it wasn't real. They just said that it would take me a long time to figure out how to use it. And so I still didn't revisit that whole thing. So from there, we skipped to much later in life. Somewhere I hit upon the idea of that, in the Bible Belt during the Satanic Panic 80s, there was no such thing as magic, and it was of Satan. That was just period. You weren't supposed to touch it. And I decided that it was real, and I was going to find it one way or another. And so I would take inspiration from, Star Wars heavily. I really wanted to do some Jedi things. Any kind of fiction. I wanted magic items like magic rings, magic swords, magic. And I just started how little kids pretend? That's how I tried to learn magic. And eventually it worked. I would take these concepts and I would pretend to do it, but I would really mean it. And I just kept at that until it started working. I managed to program my own reality so that it works like Muppet Babies or some shit, just through like little kid imagination. And so by the time I actually hit official traditions and practices, I couldn't. I was too far off on another thing to really get down with the ritual magic or the, you know, I'd be like, well, why don't you just like do it?
Do the thing, yeah.
And that didn't go over. Yeah, Julie, do the thing.
Why are we still casting the circle? It's been 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I'm not even going to tell that story. Yeah. So from that point, I kind of went a Genesis shaman route. I would just take whatever concept I wanted to play with from role-playing games, video games, fiction, books, movies, whatever. Like take The Matrix with their, you know, you can bend some rules in their physical augmentation. Like I would try to do that, and of course it would fail. But then it might kind of work, you know, in a way, and then I would shift my focus to the way that it kind of worked and try to do that and get good at that. And that way I would find the places that reality would bend for me and just get good at doing those and work with whatever results I got. I would also just try things. I'd throw magic at anything. I did it all day, every day. For a long time. There's also a weird reality bubble thing that I have. I'm very aware of what comprises a particular reality. I don't really know how to explain that, but you know, your living room is different than your house is different than, you know, your neighbor's house. It's never mind. I'm not even going to go into the whole reality bubble thing. But anyway, mostly I would just try things and see, not so much that it would work, because most of it failed, but I would see if any of it worked, and then I would play with that bit. And so that's kind of my scientific method, my shoddy scientific method.
No, it reminds me.
I did summon her.
Storm Fairy Wolf, who I was at one of his rituals at Convo, and this was a revelatory moment where he was working with folks, and you know, he's leading them through the ritual and everything, and he's like, and if you don't feel it working, imagine what it should feel like, and like really actively
that precisely,
like imagine what it should feel like if you would expect this to be real, because that's a starting point. Anyway, so
yeah, and if you can. Oh yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I can come back to it.
Mind feel like this thing there where
yeah. Let's blame string theory, astronomy and NPR for my witchy point of order on my path. And I say this because I very clearly remember a turning point in my figuring out what my path was supposed to be, it did not occur to me until I had been studying with the teaching group that I still have a strong set of ties with in West Tennessee. It's called Summerlin Grove. I've been studying with them for a couple of years, and they put you through a whole course of stuff just to figure out what you want your path to be and get your head right. And if you have a previous socio-religious framework that you need to shed and get right with before you move into learning about magical practice, they really double down on you to do that work, which I appreciated. As someone who comes from a very long line of Methodist lay preachers who are fabulous people, but not where I'm at these days. And here I was, so two years into studying with that bunch, and I did not know that putting my magic and my music together was going to be at the core of me. And it took me a long time to get there, but one of the things that really helped me get there was in driving between the day job I did not like and the recording session that I was looking forward to. Going around the 240 loop in Memphis, I'm listening to NPR, as one does, and the Earth and Sky segment comes on with new information from scientists in Cambridge about a black hole in the Perseus galaxy They have measured the frequency that it is putting off, and they have put it in the terms of the Western musical scale and figured out that this black hole has been singing B flat consistently for however many hundreds of years. And, and that was the point at which I said, okay, so science actually has got, some branches of science have got a basis for me to go ahead and jump off and say that music is part of everything. And my goal as a practitioner where music is concerned is to affect positive change and help people be okay. But it took me a while to put that together with, I could do spell work as music, as healing, all at the same time. And I am not a scholar of any sort. I am not someone who has done more than put a toe into sound healing, for instance. I have studied, I studied Reiki until both my teachers died, and then sort of have hit a plateau after that. But they're just weaving it all together has not been difficult as far as sort of the flagstones placing themselves in front of each other since that point at which I heard about that black hole. I call it my black hole moment because it's sort of been lining itself out. It was after that that I said aloud as a spell and then made a spell happen at my desk at the day job I didn't like. I wish my job could be driving around the country and singing for my friends. After I got home from another witchy event that had blown my mind in ways that it really truly needed to. And now it's, I won't say it's effortless, but it's opened me up to what I talked about before with connecting with spirits of place and with whatever, being the conduit for whatever healing needs to be done and whatever the people who are there to put their emotional well-being into my hands while I am singing need the most in that moment. And there's some channeling that goes on, but I, like I said, not a scholar of any kind. So I don't like to claim that I do channeling during my concerts because I don't know who's coming through. I don't know what's happening. I just flow with it, and flowing with it is part of what makes it work from inside. I can't see what I'm doing from outside. I only know how it feels from in here. But Michelle, your point.
Yeah, no, like ding, 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 ding.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm
Yeah.
exactly what you said. Like it's not necessarily like you can read all the books. I mean, I've got 5,000 books. You can read all the books, but it doesn't teach you what
I've seen them with my eyeballs, those
Yeah.
5,000 books.
Yeah, it doesn't teach you what it feels like. Like there's no right or wrong way. There's just the way it flows through you. Actually, there is a right or wrong way. Does it work? That's the right way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So over to me. Okay. I feel like we're doing the wave. All right. So, well, as I mentioned, weird things always happened when I was growing up, but I didn't know they were weird. So, I think I was in middle school before I realized that other people's moms couldn't see their imaginary friends. Just their moms, not their dads. Their dads could not. And so there were just things that we did. There were binding spells that I learned very young. If someone were being a particular bully or just not a nice person, especially if they were picking on someone else, there were always things we could do. So right, wrong, or indifferent, that was kind of what was going on in my house. And then as I got older, I felt it was once I started to get a little older and grown, I started to realize, okay, well, first of all, everyone else doesn't do that. Kind of learned that the hard way, friends. And then I started thinking, well, I need to read, I need to find a system, get structure, put names to everything that I do to make it more real, right? So trying to find my identity, I guess, a little bit with that. And so I did try that. I tried reading all of the Wicca books, the magic books. I could find the fairy Wicca. I thought I was really going to get that one. I thought that was going to be it. And really what I found is there's certain things that I take a bit from along the way, but I tend to always go back to my roots, right? I kind of tend to default back there. I worry about that sometimes, like I'm not growing enough. I need to be more open. But when it comes down to it, I guess I know what works. And like you were saying, so usually what it feels like inside, I know what that feels like. So I know what it feels like when it's supposed to be working. And I know if it's not working. So I just stop because I feel like I'm kind of wasting my time. And I probably maybe stop too soon sometimes. Maybe I need to try a little harder with new things, give it a go a little bit longer. But it's hard because if you know something that works, you just kind of want to flip back to what works, right? So I've read a bit. I continue to read, to learn, incorporate a few things, but I do tend to default back to the old family East Texas voodoo kind of stuff.
I have a follow-up question, not to jump in, because I experience this in my own practice. There's the time where you feel it and you know it's going to work, and then there's those times where you feel sort of like a great hand going, you could push past me, but you probably don't want to do this. And being a cheeky bastard that I am, I've always pushed past it at least once or twice.
As you do. I mean,
you can't tell me the stove is hot. I have to tell you that it's hot.
Yes.
I have learned experiment that when you feel don't push past this. That's a limit to respect. That requires some respect.
Well, that's the reaching out and touching a particular thread in reality and giving it a tug, and then you look down the line a little bit and go, oh crap, look at all that stuff it's attached to, and maybe I'll leave that one alone
and never mind. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had that thing too, Zosh, where I kind of have gone in a direction before and thought, oh well, maybe there's something kind of gently telling me to stop, but I kind of have to be slapped in the face sometimes, right? Stop. I just kind of, oh, it feels like it's working. And if something's pushing back, I must be onto something. There's that aspect of my personality. So I completely understand that for sure.
Yeah. I feel like I'm still very much discovering what all the things are that I even do. Like I don't really separate the mundane and the magical so much. Like a lot of the magic I do is about I want to do this. I want this to be a reality in my life. So like an example, a silly example, but one that's come back up very recently, is that in 2007, I wanted to be able to start my own business, Home Harmonizers, and I wanted to just work for one client for a while. So I was like, well, okay, how do I do this? Well, I want to put out a Craigslist ad at exactly the right time to find a family that I can just work for a while.
Most people find serial killers on Craigslist.
Yeah. So I made this nice ad. I put it in a few places, and I got an email from some people. Their last name was Kennedy, but I was living in Chicago at the time. And I was like, surely there are many Kennedys. So I, respond to the email. I go up for an interview, and it is in fact those Kennedys. And I was like, oh, I mean, cool. That seems fine. And had a wonderful year, working for them, taking care of their house. I sort of stayed in loose touch. I did some odd jobs for them over the years.
Fun fact, they have a dog named Hot Diggity.
Yeah, he's still around. I love him so. So I had texted them a year ago saying, hey, I just wanted you to know that I had such a wonderful time working for you all those years ago. If you ever have odd jobs that you need help with now, feel free. I'm still doing the same sort of stuff. So I'm still bopping around. I have free time every so often. And it looks like later this summer, I will probably be working for them again for a few months. And it comes at a perfect time to support the work of some other people that I was getting very focused on being able to support. And that feel, the feel of those little things clicking into place and knowing when to be I need to tell these people thank you, which led directly to a couple of really cool projects that are in the works. There really is a feel that I've only been able to reproduce it when I'm really doing something that really matters to me. And the mattering can be as silly as a suitcase and getting that suitcase to use later. Or it can be something as important as what do I want to do with my life? For me, those two things, the magic that I do is definitely chaotic. It is definitely happenstance. It's by no means ceremonial. Like the power that I call on is only, to my perception, me. I had spotted a question earlier about, well, like how do you do this if you're not going through these ritual steps? And for me, the ritual step is really being in touch with myself, which is why shadow work is such an important part of what I do too. Because if I don't know who I am to connect with that, I'm not going to do magic for real, actual me. I'm going to do it for someone who isn't, and it's not going to be as powerful. Yeah, it also, it feels very much like a work in progress. Like I had mentioned in the introductions that I was sort of exploring this new sort of magic. I still don't have very good words for it, but it seems to be a mix of probability or prediction and pulling matter out of nowhere, or energetic matter out of nowhere. Like you saw the first thing that I did with it, and it didn't feel like energy work. Like my hands weren't hot. I wasn't pulling on the usual, like, this is where I get my internal juice from. It was just like, suddenly there's a thing. I don't know if I've shifted my perspective to see it. I don't know if reality has shifted to like let me perceive it. But there are so many kinds of magic out there. Like, other than experimenting and seeing what works, I don't know. I don't know what would.
Well, and I mean, that's how I ended up like making my own tradition, because like I liked, I'm a reader. Like I'm a mix of Kess and Ryan or Arjo, in the sense of like pop culture stuff and like, ooh, that's cool. And I saw Star Wars when I was 4.5, right before my life-saving heart surgery. So like it was just infused in my brain. Like that was the story I carried with me into the moment that I was either going to live or die. Like just down and replaying scenes from it down into anesthesia. So I mean, like it sunk in, and totally tried Jedi mind tricks growing up, like all the time. And sometimes they worked. But would also like read the stuff. And the other thing was, there was this aspect of stuff that like I would just know how to do things. And I wouldn't be able to explain where the information came from, where the knowledge came from. And as a reader, I'd be like, well, does this exist somewhere else? Like, is this a real thing? Like, where is this coming from? And so like the path to my practice was one of, here's what I'm already doing. Is there something else in the world that talks about something like this? So again, growing up during the satanic panic and shit, the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s in the Midwest, I had to like fight tooth and nail to find out that even such a thing as vital energy existed. I discovered, prana in the Bhagavad Gita and chi. And like, I was like, holy fuck, it's not just me. I'm not just a weirdo. Like there's really stuff here. And yet, like, there were some family practices that I think I didn't appreciate, because I was raised by my Irish American grandmother and her family. And so there were things that you just did with the fairies. And you'd put offerings out. And let me tell you, not glitter shitter fairies, like, tooth and claw and red wild fairies. The real sort of fairies that you don't fuck with. Like, you leave them offerings because you want them to be nice and leave you the fuck alone.
Yes.
Yeah, but like,
Gosh, that made me think of a book that I really love right now. And I don't know if we're reversed on screen or not, but I just want to share that because
that is an amazing treasure.
This motherfucker right here, okay? This is full of things that people will talk about as big deal magical practice these days, but y'all, this is what people just did.
Yeah,
this is what you just did. Your aunt did it, your mom did it, your uncle's cousin's best friend did it, and I didn't really have such a concept of that before this came into my life, and I refer to it a lot lately.
Yeah, I think with studying, one of the things was realizing that by any other name, by many different names, like people just do this shit. And in the dominant religious culture, often kind of have to hide it under things. And I think my biggest resentment to any of that was that like it made it this like evil treasure hunt. where I had to like, fight tooth and nail in
Yes.
I know.
fiction or in somebody's movie, or I maybe found like, I think my first magical book officially was Francis Barrett's The Magus, which mostly just made me hate ceremonial magic and think that it was like way too much fucking work and very annoying. Because like Arthur and everybody, like, why am I going to waste the time to cast a circle, call the quarters, summon all this fucking shit when I can just be like, do the thing.
Exactly.
Oh.
Wham!
So one of the things that I kind of wanted people to hear with this panel was how there's an organic quality to magic or practice or whatever we want to call this. And while there is a valid path to learning from teachers, to learning structured things, and Kess is a really good example of that, there are many legitimate paths that are an inward road through a crooked path that has no guide. And you have to kind of go by feel and by sense. And it does mean that you make some fucking mistakes and you have some failures, but every one of those teaches you. Like you have to kind of like bang your face into the wall before you realize that the wall is there with a lot of that.
Yeah, and before you realize that your face is maybe worth protecting a little.
Yeah. Well, I also think the unquantifiability of the magic, where it straddles quantum mechanics and string theory, and there are scientific aspects as science has started to like really delve into how perceptual reality, like pretty much our perception influences reality pretty significantly. And James Gleick's Chaos, which is a book on fractals, was as revelatory a magical text to me as a teenager, as actually more so than most of the stuff that I read that was specifically a magical book. So let's try to get a couple of the questions. There were some good ones. And there was a real quick one of like, did Griff have a priest leaning? And oh boy, howdy, yes he does.
Yes. So pretty easy to understand. Just looking at me, the warrior caste aspect, but absolutely, there's the priest case, and honestly, that came to me in my in much younger in my life. That is the role that I was in before I knew of House Kheperu, and I'd be in this role for a few months, and then I'd get burnt out, It wasn't until I was with House Kheperu that I realized, oh, wait a minute, there's this other thing, this other primary role that I need to be doing, and this other aspect, this priest aspect, is the backup singer. So that's so yes, very definitely the priest case leaning.
So Debs asks, is there a sense of guilt that you can do things? They often feel incredible guilt at influencing the world, and worry that maybe it's not fair play. And that's a question that I've heard people in different ways express, of like, just because you can influence reality, like, are there rules? Should you feel bad that you're like imposing your will on reality?
I mean, my take on that.
Okay, I've got something.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Take it away, Arjun.
In my personal view, the short answer is no. I mean, people don't have to feel bad for being able to cook well, or play sports well, or play music, or do whatever well. You have the skill. Now, as far as ethics goes, what I find is I find no difference in magical action and physical action. If I do it with my own two hands, I'll do it with magic, no problem. And but vice, if I wouldn't, I wouldn't. And that's where that line I think it sits. And I've tested it. I've poked at it. I've violated other people's ethics with no problem. But if I violate my own ethics, then that's that's a little problematic.
We
That gets me, and I feel bad, and I should feel bad. So yeah, that's anyway. Go ahead.
we influence reality every moment of every day and everything we do. I'm holding a tin can and it's nice and round. Oh, it's squished. I just influenced reality. Where is the difference between influencing it in that fashion and flexing a different set of muscles and influencing it in a different fashion? To squeeze this can just happens to be easier with my fingers than it is with my brain. But that might not be the case for everything. So,
Yeah.
I also think that there's an aspect of, in terms of guilt versus no guilt, when you take an action, are you prepared for the consequences of that action? And when you take an action, even if you are prepared for the consequences of that action, are you prepared for the consequences that are going to happen that you will not see, regardless of whether that is magical or physical? You need to be prepared to accept the things that will come from the actions that you take. And I sort of feel and live going through the world that is every day, that is every breath, that is every moment. We are individually catalysts, regardless of whether we are doing that because of a magical effect or because of a conscious choice, to take a job. Every action we take is a pebble dropped in the stream of possibility. And those ripples are going to echo outwards and, depending on the theories you go through, are breaking off and splitting into micro realities. And those things are happening. Consequences are reverberating out and coming back. So you have the ability to, perform a magical effect. Awesome. If you do, what consequences do you see? Can you accept those? If you can't, don't do it. If what you are going to do is going to be bringing that guilt, then maybe already before that action is taken, we need to think, should we be doing this thing or not doing this thing? And then if you can accept those consequences, can you accept the things you can't see? Because I know that my actions are going to affect the things that I can conceive of, but then that person I interact with is going to go and do something, and I have no control over that or necessarily any knowledge of that, but it is eventually going to ripple outwards. And sort of for me, like part of the journey of coming to an understanding and being willing to be somebody putting will work out into the world is that I can't control where that's going to go. I can direct it to some extent, and I have to, and I do, accept the consequences that come, whether they are ones that I wanted or not. And if that causes, me or someone else pain, then that's going to have to be dealt with. It's going to have to be faced. So how do you deal with the guilt? In the same way that you deal with any other strong emotional processing and things that came up in other conversations and lectures last night. Therapy, therapy, therapy.
Yay! Such a good refrain. So I have a slightly different take, although I absolutely agree with everything everyone has said about this. For me, I feel like my path is one of self-discovery. And I try not to do harm to others on that path. Like, I'm not going to discover myself by discovering what it feels like to stab a bunch of people. But what I do.
I mean, there are some people who need standing right
okay,
now.
Yes, that's true.
But the consequence is not desirable.
But the thing for me is that I'm actually more likely to feel guilt if I don't explore the abilities I have. Like, if I just let the things I can do lie fallow and unexplored, no one else is able to do what I can do. As far as I know, it seems to be completely unique from every person to every person I've talked to. But everybody has things like that.
Yeah.
And to me, if we are magical practitioners and we are actually committed to understanding ourselves and understanding the world, the only way to actually do that is to understand what we can do. And I think the only way to understand what we can do is by doing it. So I feel like I don't tend to feel guilt about doing things. What I actually feel guilt for is if I'm not doing enough, which is also a dangerous rabbit hole, like, because there's always more that you can do, and this leads to lots of tired Illyrias. But I think I would rather be tired and like strained and test my limits than I would feel so careful about ever doing anything that I end up not understanding what I'm capable of at all. And that's what I like.
As long as you meter it with the, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. That's
yeah.
And there was one last thing, and we won't have enough time to get like really, really into it, but the question, when a lot of people talk about magic and doing magic, especially when they're teaching others to do it, there's a huge focus on visualize this, visualize that. And the language, I very much blame Shakti Gawain and creative visualization. And I've been trying to slightly like reword it, because for people who aren't visual imaginers, they think that since they're not seeing something in their head, they're not accomplishing anything. And I want to be clear that it's more a catch-all of intent and will. I think many of us avoid, I know I avoid using like imagine, because our culture has this bias against if you're imagining it, then it's not real. And all of this, you are using imagination, whether that imagination is just saying, I want a thing to happen and it will happen, or you're painting pretty pictures in your head, or your imagination is bringing sound and music into the world.
Or you're intending that a specific outcome take place without necessarily picturing the steps to get there.
Yeah, imagination is the tool. Visualization is a part of that for some people, but be aware that each person's way of imagining is going to manifest differently. Suj, looks like you have something to say. Or were you just agreeing with body language?
I said that because that kitty got off my lap.
And I know Kes can speak a little bit more to that, and I think we're at time.
Yeah, we've got like one minute left. So this might be a better conversation to pick back up this evening.
In the panel?
Yeah, in the open discussion panel, because there's so much more here. There's so much.
Yeah.
There's
No, and Suj, Arjil, thank you so much for bringing energy in your presence, and touching on like seeing the
love you all.
place. It's been my experience that spirits of place, like they like to be sung to, and they like to be told stories of and about. Like mythic poesis is a major way in which they communicate with us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. I wish we had 17 more hours to talk about it. Oh my gosh.
Well, we can. We don't have to get permission.
Don't be strangers, or at least no stranger than you already are.
So let's see. I've got a thread going on our Facebook page where I've been asking all of our presenters to drop their links, so that if people want to find out more of what they do, it is easy. I will be dropping that lovely sjtucker.com link onto that thread, and also on our Discord. Anyone else, if you have a practice, a blog, stuff you sell, stuff you do, link it to us on those threads so that people can find you and continue these conversations later.
Do not feel guilty if you get your inspiration or instruction on how to do magic. Resources. If you read a book and it's fiction and it speaks to you, on one hand, like myth is a fantastic and powerful way of transmitting information. But if you've ever read a fiction writer's work or seen somebody's movie and you're like, or the TV series, and you're like, I think they are totally into this shit, and they're using this to like get some of these things out. I've been able to have the conversations with some of those folks on my bookshelves, and if you suspect it, it's likely true. Like, it's really there. put it there for a reason. It's one way of getting things out, especially back in the day when you couldn't put out a witchcraft book or a magic book. Like you wove it into your story and you like let it go out into the world.
All right, and with that, we will weave our stories together, but we will also go out into the world. Love you all. See you again soon. Our next for now.
Bye.